Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends. During this difficult and trying time, we need to come together by staying apart. We all need to do our part to flatten the curve and save lives. Stay isolated and continue to social distance, wash your hands frequently and effectively, and help spread the word to others who don't understand how they can make a difference. Finally, I'd like to thank the real heroes and legends out there, everyone whose jobs are essential and are working hard every day for all of us. To find out more on how you can stay safe and make a difference, check out the World Health Organization's website at www.who.int. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to another day of Ikoria and Commander 2020 previews. So yesterday we did not do a preview video because we did our Market Watch video, so I do have 2 days worth of previews to go over today. Around 100 cards. There's a lot to talk about. Unfortunately, with all these cards, to get through them in a timely manner, I'm not going to be able to go into the detail that I normally go into with each one. But at the very least, we'll go over the highlights. I'll talk about at least first impressions as I go through these cards. And with so many cards coming out so fast, this will be a good way to see if you missed anything this weekend. Quickly before we get into it though, just a fast reminder, if you go over to flipsidegaming.com, you can still use the Heroes promo code to save 10% on orders over $10. However, they're currently not shipping items out, so I just wanted everyone to be aware of that. Without any further ado, though, let's get into it. We're going to begin with a Japanese language preview, loosely translated, as all these translations will be. It's Lava Brink Adventurer. So, this is actually kind of a sweet card. In Limited, I'd be really happy to play this. It's a 3 casting cost 3/3. It's a rare, you won't see it all the time. But on top of that, the ability is going to allow me to make a decision based on what I've seen from my opponent so far. And a lot of stuff is going to get shut off when it comes to this card anyway. It will have protection from the chosen converted mana cost, so just not on the battlefield. It goes for anything trying to target it or what have you. That's actually really, really sweet. I think there's even a chance this could see a little standard play. If you knew the deck you were going up against, you can make a better decision when it comes to choosing odds or evens. Next we have Stormwild Caprador. This could be good in a Feather deck in Commander or Brawl. Could this card be enough for Feather to make a comeback in Standard? I don't know if this alone would get you there, but this would be a step in the right direction. This one's a Korean language preview. It's Ominous Seas, and this is another kind of interesting card that isn't going to probably be all that great in Standard, of course, because you have Teferi Time Raveler and Brazen Borrower. It would never really get off the ground, most likely. But when it comes to Limited, if you could get this out on turn 2 or just early in the game, it could be very good for you. Better with some cycling backup. When you actually do cash in and remove the counters, you don't lose this card, so it could stick around. If it shows up later in the game or at a bad time, it has cycling, so you could cycle it away. I like that kind of flexibility. And when it comes to Commander or Brawl, I think it could be a decent card there. Actually, in Commander, it combos with Greater Good to let you basically draw your whole deck if you wanted to. Next is Bastion of Remembrance, and in Limited, I think this could be good with the Orzhov strategy. It feels like if you're pretty deep into that strategy, especially in draft, this could be a good card for you. Commander or Brawl Sacrifice decks could also be interested in this. Pouncing Shore Shark. I think this is going to be a really good Mutate card in Limited because it has Flash more than anything. I really like Mutate and Flash together, and if you use the Mutate cost, the blue and 3 seems pretty reasonable. The triggered ability is really good too, maybe gets you past a board stall. Shark Typhoon, maybe my new favorite Magic card of all time because it's called Shark Typhoon. And the art is also pretty amazing as well. So let's talk Limited first. It's a rare again, so it should be good, and it is. It's going to be best maybe in the Izzet decks, but with that cycling ability, it's really going to be good, I think, in any build. Beyond that, Commander and Brawl players, I think, could have a good time with this. And maybe it could see a little standard play too. I could see this showing up as like a one of in some decks. Thieving Otter is next. This is going to be fine in Limited, a 2/2 for 3 with Curiosity built in. Yeah, that's going to be good for you. Really nice common. Footfall Crater. This is a really cool card because it only costs 1 red. Now granted, there's a little bit of a drawback here. If I put this on my land and I tap it for the ability, then I'm not tapping the land for mana that turn, but you know what? That's okay. In Drafter Sealed, if I'm in an aggressive build or a stompy build, I'll be more than happy to play this. It even has cycling if it shows up at a bad time. Standard, maybe it sees play in an aggressive or stompy build for the same reasons. It's not asking much, it's very cheap, and it does give you cycling for flexibility. Next one is a Korean language preview, Rooting Moloch, and another good card for Limited. Like, you don't want to play a 4/4 for 5 normally, but when this enters the battlefield, you get to exile target card with a cycling ability from your graveyard. you have until the end of your next turn to play that card, so you have a little time, which is nice. And also, if this shows up at a time where you can't cast it, then you can cycle it away. There's a lot of good cycling cards in this set, so you cycle something early and then you have an opportunity to get it back and get some beef on the battlefield at the same time. Nothing wrong with that in Draft or Sealed, as long as you have a decent amount of cycling cards in your deck. This one's a Spanish language preview, Migratory Greathorn. I like this card quite a bit. Now, forecasting costs for a 3/4, but the mutate cost is a green and 2. When the creature mutates, you get to search for a basic land card, and it goes on the battlefield tap, not to your hand. And it has decent size behind it considering what you're paying, especially if you pay that mutate cost. So definitely in Draft or Sealed, I'm interested in this. This is a card that is going to be relatively economical, and at the same time gives me opportunities to fix color and ramp. Standard, I think this could see play. Like, I would put this in a deck with Paradise Druid and a Boreal Grazer. There could be a lot of value to be had there. This one's a Spanish language preview, Mythos of Brokos. And this is another part of that Mythos cycle. These cards have all been very solid, actually. When it comes to limited, I'll be happy to play this because especially Golgari colors will care about what's in the graveyard. And if I'm playing Sultai colors to some degree, this is like a roundabout tutor, which could be very powerful in Draft or Sealed. I also think that Commander players and Brawl players could be interested in this. Granted, it's not maybe as efficient as some other tutors that exist out there in Commander, but it also does help you populate the graveyard, and some decks will be interested in that too. Next is a Chinese traditional language preview, Ikoria, and that probably won't be the final name, of course, but that's what we got right now. And for limited in the Golgari colors, again, you're going to appreciate this card. Those are the colors that will be populating the graveyard, and this is, first off, a 4/4 for 4, even if it is two different colors. That alone makes me think, okay, I'm interested in playing this in Draft or Sealed, but that mutate ability puts it over the top. It's still going to cost you 4, but it does get a little more flexible considering it is going to be hybrid mana this time. And when it does mutate, you get to regrow. That's a very powerful effect, which could occur multiple times over the course of the game. Rael the Everwise, probably my favorite card of the day, as a matter of fact. Check this out. The stats aren't amazing. A 3 casting cost, 0/3. It gets +1/+0 based on how many instants and sorceries are in your graveyard, but that's not why I'm interested. Whenever you discard one or more cards for the first time each turn, draw that many cards. So you can only do it once per turn, but if you discard 3 cards at once to an effect, you're drawing 3 cards. There's a lot of different effects out there that can really take advantage of something like this. Let's talk Commander and Brawl. I mean, there's going to be things like cycling, for example. Cycling decks in Brawl, I think, could be a big thing this coming season, just simply because you can go ahead and get tons of value. Cycle at the end of your opponent's turn. If you need to, cycle again on your turn. If this is in play, you're seeing a lot of cards. In Commander, there's a ton of ways to exploit this. Things like Wheel of Fortune, Lion's Eye Diamond, the list goes on and on and on. You can find huge value in that format especially. And note, this is a legendary creature, so this could be your Commander. Standard Pioneer, I think it has a chance to see play there too, maybe like in a standard cycling deck or something. I would go as far to say that this would be maybe even better in like Modern, Legacy, or Vintage, but I am a little concerned about the fragility of a creature with 3 toughness in those formats. Although, maybe someone could come up with a build and make it work. Alright, that does it for the Ikoria previews today. We're going to move on to the Commander 2020 previews. But first, we're going to go over all the new cards, and then at the end, I'll quickly show you some of the reprints that they have previewed. Now, remember, since we're moving on to Commander 2020, these cards are not going to be standard legal. They're only legal in the Eternal formats. Things like Commander, Legacy, Vintage. Can't play these in Brawl even. So just remember that as we go through today. I know this preview season has been very confusing because they're mixing these cards up. The last thing I'll say, yet again, I would love to spend more time on these cards. Usually when we do Commander previews, I spend a lot of time talking about different deck strategies, different combos. We just sadly don't have the time. So many cards are coming out so quickly. So I'm just going to give my first impressions and just some quick thoughts about these cards as we go through. And again, this is a good opportunity to make sure you didn't miss anything this weekend. So we're going to begin by looking at the partner commanders that are coming. We have Trin, Champion of Freedom, and Sylvar, Devourer of the Freedom here. Obviously, they're going to work great together. Trin, at the beginning of your end step, if you attack this turn, you make a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. The other creature has Menace, sacrifice a human, it gets a +1/+1 counter, and then it gains indestructible until end of turn. So Trin's going to make the tokens, and Sylvar is going to eat the tokens. Helden, Avid Arcanist, and Paco, Arcane Retriever. I love this pair. The flavor is off the charts. The Retriever gets to attack in with haste too. And when that happens, every player, including yourself, will exile the top card of their library. Any non-creature cards exiled that way will give Paco a +1/+1 counter, which is pretty cool. But it gets better. The cards that Paco fetches, any non-creature cards exiled that way can be played because of Haldun's ability. Here's the third pair, Nikara Lair Scavenger and Yannick Scavenging Sentinel. Again, obviously, you would imagine they work well together, and they do. Nikara says whenever another creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had one or more counters on it, you get to draw a card and you lose a life. Yannick is going to help distribute those counters. When this enters the battlefield, exile another creature you control until this leaves the battlefield, so it will come back at some point. Whenever you do this, distribute X +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures, where X is the exiled creature's power. And remember, you have all these other specialty counters that I'm sure are going to be in this deck too, and you could find a lot of value, I think, with this pair. Brawlin Sky Shark Rider and Shabraz the Sky Shark. Okay, I really like the Retriever, but this is pretty sweet too. These cards work together very cohesively if you're playing Cycling. So the discard portion of Cycling is rewarded by Brawlin. Whenever you discard a card, put a +1/+1 counter on this, and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. But they also have abilities to help each other out. In this case, you can pay a red, target shark gains trample until end of turn. Shabraz then cares about the card draw side of Cycling. Whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and you gain 1 life. It also has flying, and you can pay a hybrid white or blue, and target human gains flying until end of turn. Yeah, so definitely going to be great in a Cycling deck, or any time you're going to be discarding and drawing a lot of cards. These two are a little more straightforward. Kazur, Ruthless Stalker, and Yukima, Stalking Shadow. Yukima can't be blocked, and then Kazur is going to reward you whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player by putting a +1/+1 counter on the creature. So in theory, with these two, Yukima is just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. And when it finally leaves the battlefield, it will deal X damage to target player, and you gain X life where the X was its power. So at first, they don't do a whole lot, but they start to snowball over time if the game goes long. And remember, the ability on Kazur is going to work for all your creatures. So especially if you maybe have a go wide strategy or other evasive creatures, that alone could be good. Alright, that does it for the partners. Let's look at a few more legendary creatures. This is Akim the Soaring Wind. This card's perfect for any kind of token strategy in Jeskai colors. It's going to create an additional 1/1 white bird creature token with flying the first time you create 1 or more tokens each turn. And beyond that, then creature tokens you control can gain double strike until end of turn if you pay Jeskai in 3. Kelsey and the Plague. I always liked experience counters. It is nice to see that mechanic back with this card. Tayam Luminous Enigma. Here's another card that wants to play in the graveyard, so definitely worth noting. There's a lot of graveyard strategies that are very solid in Commander. And also, each other creature you control when this enters the battlefield comes in with an additional vigilance counter on it. That part is important too, since you do have to remove counters to activate the second ability. Xeris the Writhing Storm. I really like the chaos cards that can be used politically. This one in particular feels like it kind of wants to be maybe in like a group hug deck or like a pillow fort deck of some kind. There's definitely benefit for attacking somebody, and you could politically play that and just say, hey, look, I'll attack you. You're going to get some tokens out of it. We're both going to draw cards. Or you could just create a situation where you have enough defense, like pillow fort, where you can attack in when you want to, give players tokens, and maybe they'll have a hard time attacking you, so they end up attacking each other with them. Also, those extra cards, if they can't be used against you easily, will be used against other players. These type of strategies can be a lot of fun. Zexara the Exemplary. I'll tell you, Hydra decks have been popular recently in Commander. Here's a great card for one of those builds, perhaps. Okay, that does it for the legendary creatures that are new. Let's move on to the new white cards. Call the Coppercoats. Okay, if you're looking to make a lot of 1/1 white human soldier tokens quickly, this is a card to do that. So if you have a sacrifice deck or a go wide deck of some kind, or maybe a humans deck, we have seen a lot of cards that do help humans out recently, then yeah, this is going to be the card for you. Cartographer's Hawk. I like these kind of cards. White has a few that do things like this, but if I can deal combat damage to a player if they have more lands than me, then I do get to go through my deck, take out a plains, and it goes into play tapped, right into play. I do have to return this to my hand, but that's okay. This is one of those white cards that will at least help you stay even on resources. Dismantling Wave. You can destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment each opponent controls for just 3 mana. Or if you cycle it for a much higher cost, 2 white and 6, it will destroy all artifacts and enchantments. Flawless Maneuver. There's a series of these cards. You're going to see more of them as we go. But if you have your commander in play, you may cast the spell without paying its mana cost. That's pretty awesome. In this case, creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Fantastic instant, especially if you have a go wide strategy, or maybe some board sweeps that you're trying to play, or a way to defend against board sweeps that your opponents play. Herald of the Forgotten. This is going to be good in cycling decks. When this enters the battlefield, if you cast it, return any number of target permanent cards with cycling abilities from your graveyard to the battlefield. So it doesn't let you return everything. It has to be a permanent, but there's still a lot of value to be had here in the right deck. Martial Impetus. I love the goad mechanic. I'm glad to see it back again. There's a whole series of these cards too, where you can enchant an opponent's creature. You can enchant your creature too with these, but they really feel like they want to be played on an opponent's creature, and they just cause all sorts of chaos. In this case, whenever enchanted creature attacks, each other creature that's attacking one of your opponents, so it could be any opponent, gets +1/+1 until end of turn. And the goad means that it has to attack, but it can't come at you as long as there is someone else the creature can attack. Verge Rangers. This is another really sweet card for white. It does give you a pretty good creature, a 3/3 for a strike for 3, but you can look at the top of your library at any time, which is nice to just have that information sometimes, but there's more to it than that. As long as one of your opponents controls more lands than you, you can play a land from the top of your deck. Nothing wrong with that. Crystalline Resonance. This is actually really sweet for those cycling decks. Whenever you cycle a card, which you can do at instant speed, remember, this can become a copy of another target permanent until your next turn. And that's permanent, not just creature. You know, in a game of Commander, there's going to be a lot of things to do with this. Decoy Gambit. Obviously, when you let your opponents make decisions like this, they're going to make the best decisions for themselves. But what I like about Commander is it's not that simple. There's political plays that you have. There's going to be things that are going to be good for some players, not good for other players. You're going to get some kind of advantage off this at some point, no doubt. Eon Frolicker. Now, you don't want to give target opponent extra turns unless maybe you're making some kind of deal with them. But I think the idea of this card is they're not going to get to play that extra turn because this is a card you use to put somebody away. This one's a Japanese language preview, Heavenly Whale. I like Delve, so Delve is always going to help you escalate the game a little bit quicker. What's kind of interesting about this, though, is the casting cost is really high. So let's say I delve 4 cards away. I'm paying 2 blue for a 3/3 flyer. I mean, in Commander, that's not amazing. But what's interesting about this card is the ability. Whenever this attacks, you may put an instant or sorcery card exiled by this into your hand. So if you do delve some cards away that you've already used, here's an opportunity to use those instants and sorceries again. And I think that's where the real power of this card is. It has to be backed up by some powerful instants and sorceries. But if you got them, yeah, this is going to be very playable. Neset's Metamorph. Okay, now, this one is very high variance, but it is Commander. You know people are going to be playing some big creatures in their deck, especially certain builds, and you're going to be able to recognize those once the game gets going. It could also keep players off your back if this is untapped because the ability triggers on attacking or blocking. Psychic Impetus is another one of these goad enchantments, and this time whenever enchanted creature attacks, you get to scry 2. Souvenir Snatcher. This is another mutate card. This time the mutate cost, though, is a little more than the regular cost of blue and 5. But it's a 4/4 flyer. Whenever this creature mutates, gain control of target non-creature artifact. And you know, there should be some targets in a game of Commander. This one's a Spanish language preview titled Barracuda. And here's another card that wants to create chaos. Any player may cast spells as though they had flash. Your opponents, though, cannot cast spells during your turn, so that protects you a little bit from the chaos. Boneyard Mycodrax, bringing Scavenge back. A lot of cards bringing back some of these old mechanics here. And this is going to have power and toughness equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Daring Fiendbonder is going to make some opponents make some tough decisions at some point. It's a 5/1 for 4 with haste that has to attack every turn. If it does die, though, and ends up in the graveyard, you can pay a black and 1, exile it, put an indestructible counter on target creature. So do they take the 5 and just kind of deal with it? Or do they block this thing with the possibility that you're going to make something very powerful, indestructible later? Yeah, it's going to be a tough call a lot of times for the opponent. This one's a Russian language preview. It's another one of these cards that you get to play for free if you have a commander in play. Deadly Maneuver. And this time you get to exile target creature. Dredge the Mire. This one's a little awkward. Each opponent chooses a creature card in their graveyard. Put those cards onto the battlefield under your control. Obviously, the opponents are going to give you cards that aren't going to hurt them that badly. Unless, of course, maybe you make a deal with somebody. But then again, it is Commander, and there's going to be some really juicy targets out there, so someone could be forced into a corner and have to give you something good sometime. Mind Leecher, another interesting mutate ability here. This card is maybe a tad expensive if you're just looking at stats purely, but you can mutate for a black and 5. It has flying, and whenever this does mutate, exile the top card of each opponent's library face down. You may play those cards as long as they remain exiled, and again, if you mutate a number of times over the course of the game, there could be some value here. Netherborn Altar. I like this one a lot because it gives you a decision. Basically, do you keep paying the commander tax, which is going to get higher and higher over the course of the game, or at times do you just move your commander to your hand and pay life instead, but that life cost is going to get bigger and bigger every time you do it too, kind of like the commander tax. So especially in the middle of the game, I think sometimes you're going to rather pay the life. Now later, if you have a lot of mana and nothing to do with it, then you don't need this. But there are times where you would love to have your commander, but your resources are kind of tapped until you get to that point where things are a little more free-flowing. Yeah, I can see this showing up in a lot of commander decks in the future. Parasitic Impetus, and here's another one of those goad cards. Whenever enchanted creature attacks this time, its controller loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Species Specialist, this is going to be great in sacrifice decks. So if you're creating some kind of token to continually sacrifice or something like that, this is going to just give you some added value. This is fine generally in tribal decks too. Next one is a Japanese language preview. It is Titan Hunter. This is another card that's going to be very solid in sacrifice decks and actually could be punishing to your opponents if they can't make some action happen on their turns. Agitator Ants, yet another card that's just trying to create chaos. That goad mechanic is really, really fun if you've never played with it. Deflecting Swat is another one of those free cards. If you have your commander in play, you may choose new targets for target spell or ability. Fireflux Squad, this is going to be pretty good in some decks because even though there is a little bit of high variance here, you don't know what's coming up necessarily in your deck, although there are ways to work that out too. Sensei's Divining Top, for example, so on and so forth. But this is a good chance to hit a big creature that could be very impactful. And notice you don't have to sacrifice the creature at the end of turn or anything like that. You just have to sacrifice a creature to get this started. Next one's a Japanese language preview, Intermediary of War. And again, a card that's going to create a lot of chaos. Whenever one or more creatures attack an opponent or planeswalker an opponent controls. So that could be anyone attacking anybody. It's just not going to happen when they attack you. Those creatures gain menace until end of turn. There's going to be a lot of action, I think, if this is on the battlefield. Lava Brink Floodgates. Okay, again, a little high variance. Your opponents have some control over this. But again, you have a situation in Commander where you could have some political plays, or some people are going to want the big 6 damage to all creatures to happen. So ultimately, this is just going to be a fun card to play sometimes. Maybe it will work out to your advantage, maybe it won't though. Molten Echoes, I know I said I wasn't going to spend a ton of time talking about combos and very specific things in this video so we could get through the cards, but I gotta give a shout out to Fellow Dark Guardian with this card, so there's something you can do with it. But ultimately, even if you're trying to play fair with it, it's a pretty good card for any kind of tribal deck, especially if you're trying to be aggressive. Shiny Impetus, another one of the gold enchantments. And this time, when the enchanted creature attacks, you get to create a treasure token. This one's a French language preview, Spellfire Phoenix, and another card that's going to play really well with cycling cards. Even if you don't get the opportunity very often to bring this back from the graveyard to your hand, just being able to get an instant or sorcery with cycling back, combine that with the persistent 4/2 flyer, and that is worth the cost. If you do use that ability and recur this thing and do it more than once during the game, there could be a lot of value there. This one's a Portuguese language preview. If the name's right, Capricorn is actually a pretty cool name. But anyway, here's another one of those cards that's here to create chaos. And I love that in Commander. First, it is a Hydra, and if you have some mana, it could be relatively sizable. But what's different about this card is if you attack with it, the player you are attacking can redirect it to another opponent. So they pay 2, it gets a +1/+1 counter, and then they get to choose which player it's attacking. So you could possibly have people bounce this around as the creature gets bigger. Could be fun. Curious Herd, good way at instant speed to get a whole bunch of 3/3 tokens. You know there's going to be people playing a lot of artifacts and Commander, mana rocks and such. Pretty sweet defensive combat trick in a lot of situations. Glade Muse. This is interesting. I saw Mark Rosewater was having a discussion on Tumblr, I believe, about is this really a green card? How much does this bend the color pie? Whenever a player casts a spell, if it's not their turn, that player draws a card. It does open it up to everybody. Again, it has a group hug feel to it, but it is kind of interesting that it's green. Here's the green card now that lets you play it for free if you have your commander in play. It is Obscuring Haze. Prevent all damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures your opponents control. Here's your Goad Aura in green, Predatory Impetus. This time the creature gets +3/+3, pretty sizable, but must be blocked each turn if able. Ravenous Gigantotherium. This has Devour 3. I loved the Devour mechanic back in the day. It's been a long time. And again, like I said, it's fun to have these Commander products bring some of these old mechanics back, even just on one card. This is powerful. If you have a lot of tokens in play, granted, you have to have some tokens to feed to this or a lot of small creatures or something. But for each one you sacrifice when this enters the battlefield, it's going to get 3+1/+1 counters on it. This is going to get real sizable, and then it also fights everything that you want it to fight. Yeah, this card could really upset a board state. This one's an Italian language preview, Sawtusk Demolisher, and this has Trample. It's a 6/6 for 6, so it's got a little bit of beef behind it. And it has Mutate, and that Mutate cost is only a green and 3. I like that economy. Whenever this creature does Mutate too, destroy target non-creature permanent, its controller creates a 3/3 green beast token, so it's kind of like Beast Within whenever it mutates. Selective Adaptation, this is one of those cards that's going to reward you for playing a lot of keywords, and you could pull a lot of cards with this, potentially also get something sizable or consequential in play. But you could also just populate your graveyard with it too, which some decks will want to do as well. Here's a German language preview, Binding Ornament. Pretty cool mana rock here. It's a mana rock that will tap for any color for 3, but pay 4 and tap. Each player who controls a card named Binding Ornament draws a card, so that might just be you some of the time. But maybe it won't be. Sometimes you might be able to kind of forge a little partnership with other people that have Binding Ornament. Manascape Refractor. This is kind of nuts. This is going to be one of those cards everybody is going to want for numerous decks. It's basically a mana rock. It's 3 casting cost. It has all activated abilities of all lands on the battlefield, so that will include the mana ability. It comes into play tapped, so okay, it's a little slow. But once this thing's untapped, not only can it tap for probably virtually any color most of the time, but also now it's going to just steal all the abilities on all the lands on the battlefield so you can use them for yourself. And if you don't have the color mana that you need to activate an ability, that's fine too. It's got you covered with that third part of the card there. So yeah, this is going to see play all over the place. Sanctuary Blade. I really like this idea. Every time you equip it, you get to choose a new color to give the creature protection from. It gets +2/+0. It does nothing else really crazy, but being able to change that protection as you go is pretty sweet. Twinning Staff. If you like to play those decks where you get to copy spells, this will be perfect for you. And if you start to stumble, this actually can copy spells too on its own. Pay 7, tap, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. And note, because of the other ability, you're actually going to copy it twice. Nesting Grounds. This is actually pretty sweet because you can only use this ability when you could use a sorcery, but you can do a lot of different things with it. Sure, you could move a +1/+1 counter from one of your creatures to another, but you can also give away the counter. You can move it from one of your creatures to any creature. You can also move a loyalty counter from one planeswalker that you control to another planeswalker, maybe making another one of your planeswalkers get closer to its ultimate. That could be good enough, but remember, there's also all these new counters coming out with this set, where you have these like flying counters and vigilance counters and hexproof and so on. This could potentially create a lot of cool moments down the road. Alright, on to the reprints from Commander 2020, and I'm going to go through these really fast because, again, there's nothing new here. You know what these cards do in the formats where they are legal. Normally, though, I like to spend a little time talking about values and such, but again, there's just so much to cover this week. We'll begin with Astral Drift making a comeback. Eternal Dragon gets a reprint. Jace, Architect of Thought. Deadly Tempest. Alicia, Who Smiles at Death. Shared Animosity. Animist's Awakening. Crop Rotation. Masked Admirers. Ajani Unyielding. The Locust God. Nahiri the Harbinger. Nissa, Steward of Elements. Rashmi, Eternity's Crafter. Villainous Wealth. Commander Spear is back. Fluctuator. This card actually just spiked if you've been watching the market. Now here comes a reprinting with some brand new art. Life Crafter's Bestiary. Silent Arbiter. Soul Ring, of course. Command Tower, back again. This one's a German language preview, but on the left you see the Commander 2017 copy for translation purposes. It's Path of Ancestry. Alright, that does it for today's previews. Wow, we made it. So tomorrow we're going to do this all again. We're going to recap everything that comes out over the next 24 hours or so. Until next time, though, hey, thanks for watching. Take care of yourself, stay home, stay safe, take care of each other, too. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible through the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page, as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.